Hello and welcome everyone to Game Studies India's Talk 8. Today we have Prabhash Ranjan Tripathy. Born in Odisha, India, he has completed his BA English Honours and MA in English Literature and MA in Comparative Indian Literature from University of Delhi. He is currently a PhD scholar at the School of Arts and Aesthetics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has submitted his MPhil dissertation titled Playing Cyborg, a study of the gamer in the video game parlors of Delhi and Missouri, following which he is a doctoral fellow at the International Research Center, interweaving performance cultures, and is currently working on his PhD dissertation titled Between Workstation and PlayStation, the Cultural Location of Video Games in India. His interest areas include superhero comic books, anime, video games, combat sports, and mythology, and he's fascinated by felines and loves to trek, read, write, click, and play. Over to you, Prabhas.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Um, so you guys must have read the abstract. There's no point reading the abstract again. What I'll do is that this is basically the presentation is based on a paper that I recently published. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to read out the paper, but basically initially the PPTs end at some point where I lay out the problem, and after that I'll go impromptu. There are around 9 slides. After that I'll just talk about it. So yeah, um, let's get into it. So initially. Um, So initially what happens is I did my field work for my MPhil regarding in Delhi and Missouri, the arcade culture. I was going to um, these arcades which were there in 1990s, and I tried to find them, and they were still there somehow, even in 2016. So I went there and discovered something weird, that the same kind of games and a little bit of enhanced games, the new ones, were still there. So while I was fascinated theoretically with the whole idea of gamers being imagined as a cyborg, because it became a site where the biological and technological were coming together. So I was fascinated by that theoretically, but in my fieldwork, I discovered these weird machines, old games, a very concentrated gaming culture. Then I went back to 90s and I thought how concentrated that space was. That around 1980s, games start coming into India, and then by 2000, in 1996, we have our first cyber cafe, and then in 2000, gaming scene is like the history of games was like found a very historically concentrated kind of location in India. So that was also fascinating, but at the same time, I couldn't reconcile my theoretical inclinations towards looking at the gamer as a cyborg or a posthuman figure, and uh, and the gaming scene in India. So what you see is in 1990s, all the games from around the globe, all the games that were discarded, perhaps, um, or at the same time, like even recent games, everything came into India. So what you see at the right, in the pink circle, that's Alpine Racer. That's a game which I found in one of the arcades. The first shop in when you go to Missouri, the first shop when you enter into Mall Road, that's the first shop. That's a game shop, and that shop was there even in 1989, 90s when I was a kid, and I used to go there, and they had a couple of games. And then below that, you see that periscope kind of a thing. I'll show you better pictures some other time. I'm so sorry, because I mean, like, I had to just give you a sense of all the games that were there. So that's something called as Counter Kill or something like that. Okay, that's also a very retro game. And then we have in the middle we have the Terminator 2, the console which was a clone produced in China, and that became really popular because that was cheap. So we have that as well. And then we have Cadillac and Dinosaur on the top, the 3-player game, which was again which runs on a Capcom board. Then we had Mitashi. Mitashi was the first gaming console that was produced in India, and and then we had slot machines, and then we had brick games as well. So the idea that I'm trying to give here with this slide is that how concentrated the space is, how and you get the idea. So so within this space, um, um, when I encountered this space, from this space, there is this space is where the gamer is. So while there are shops in the mall which have high-end games, then there are shops, then there are home consoles, then there are brick games, then there is Mitashi, then there is PlayStation. So the question comes that this gamer, how do we even start talking about this gamer? So certain questions like who gets to play, then then we have the class angle, who gets to play, which class does one belong to, which games can the person play. Then caste, of course, because class and caste are not separate in India to begin with, and also the locations of these games. Where are these games located? Are they located in urban spaces? If they're located in urban spaces, where exactly are they located in the urban spaces? How many people have accessibility to it? And gender, like we had a previous discussion even in the same platform, and we realized that women hardly got access to this game. One of the gamers that I interviewed was a the all the female gamers that I interviewed were basically either they played at home with their brothers, but they didn't have access to, or somewhere when they were into vacation and probably entered an arcade. That's when they played. So the second question, which um, came 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 to fore, was what does one get to play with? That means basically the high-end games with the racing games, or games like Alpine Racer, or games which had the car mechanics in them and everything. Those games cost around 50 to 60 bucks per hour, or even back then they were 20 to 30. But rest of the games, the small games, were like 1 rupee per play. So, and the 1 rupee per play games were located in outside the mall, at least in Missouri. And in Delhi, they were again located in small slums like Tirlokpuri, Kalyanpuri, Kondli, uh, East Delhi. East Delhi is generally considered very poor, and there are these small places, like they will call it video game ki dukan. So it's not it's just like any other shop, which would be a small stuffy room with a couple of cabinets stacked next to each other. And the interesting thing about the cabinets is the cabinets were not did not have any signs or stickers on them. The cabinets were plain, locally assembled, and the cartridge was placed. The cartridge or the board was placed inside it, and a coin slot was attached. So the rest of the things, like I interviewed one of the one of the guys who owned such a shop, and he informed that the board was while the board was bought in from um, from Delhi, he said, but I couldn't follow up on that. From Delhi, where did it come from to Delhi? So and in Masuri, they had a carpenter and a guy called Fridge. He was called Fridge. So he would assemble these arcade machines for them, and have to bring the coin slot separately, and then attach the whole thing. But suddenly, then I asked what happened to Fridge, and he said something like Fridge was in a interreligious marriage, and the family found out, so they came looking for him, and he just left. It is these moments where Fridge leaves or something that you get come back to India, that the social reality of the space, of whether it's whether it's related to gaming or not. That's a reality check, and that was kind of a moment to think. Then the next question is, where does one play? The place of play, access, affordability, duration of play, machines. So place of play and access, affordability, I've talked about, touched upon those themes in whatever I was saying. Duration of play is another one, because because what kind of games found place in an arcade. That was important because most of the arcades which were like in small places were fighting games. The fighting games were preferred because of their short gameplay, and one coin would take maximum 60 seconds or something if you're playing in versus mode, and if not, then there was no option to play it a single player mode because nobody could last that long. I mean, if somebody would come and put a coin because it was a versus. And the machines, I've talked about the machines that there were high-end machines and there were low-end machines. Which machine does one get to play? So the Indian gamer, if when he emerges from the space, these 1990s, these colorful dump yard, when he emerges, so these are the things which one needs to think about when one is thinking about the gamer. These questions are important to answer in order to even start to articulate the gamer. So I'll read out the quote. Um, so this is the question that I ask in the paper. That's why it's in the question marks, quotation marks. So how does one account for the appearance of this new figure of the gamer? Can the figure be imagined as a cyborg? Well, the first question represents the aspiration of the paper. The second is a theoretical space that the aspiration would navigate. The choice of this space of navigation is not accidental. It emerges from a contradiction in game scholarship, namely, while on one hand the gamer is often paraded as a rupture in the history of the ludic, as the new, the cyborg, the cyber athlete, etc. On the other hand, especially in ethnographic studies, the gamer is observed as evidently masculine, rational, nationalist, elite, and practitioner of neoliberal ethos. How can the figure of the gamer be imagined as a cyborg, a posthuman figure who is the harbinger of a new subjectivity, a rupture, so to say, at the same time display a continuation of the very symptoms, problems it was supposed to replace? Now, this contradiction, what I was trying to lay out earlier was um, was that I couldn't reconcile between my theoretical inclinations and the scene that I encountered, because once I was like, okay, the biological technical association is all good, and can that be the um, sole basis upon which a cyborg can be imagined? And that's why I get into this inquiry. So at this point, it is important to remember that the cyborg as a figure, as a figuration, is created in discourse and is a contested site. Multiple claims by post-humanists, humanists, transhumanists, techno-spiritualists, etc. The question really becomes not whether the gamer can be imagined as a cyborg, but what kind of cyborg is the gamer? Now, here the question, the indications here are cyborg as Donna Haraway imagines or Rosie Brigatti imagines, is basically a figuration which is anti-human. In that sense, in human, by human I mean the hero of the liberal script, the hero of the Western liberal script, in which is not inclusive, which does not include many people. It's not representative of many people, gender, class, race, and other things come into play, like women are never human enough, or um, in India's context, Dalits are never human enough. So human category is is uh, like Donna Haraway calls for a, a politics where human identity is rejected, and and then the cyborg identity is offered as an ontology, as a new ontology, as a decision for us to make and engage in a new kind of relationship. A new kind of relationship with what? New kind of relationship with technology, basically. And because human has its own idea of its relationship with the biological and technological relationship, human remains at the center. And this centrality of human being is challenged by Donna Haraway and Bridotti, and talk and that's how the posthuman question is posed. So so well. So that is the post-humanist side, and so I have a couple of pictures like the New Age cyborg in DC, from DC universe, which is a completely masculine figure with a specific kind of a, it's a continuation of the human project, where the technology is used for uh, further emasculation and weaponization and stuff. And then we have Steel Arc. Steel Arc is a performing artist uh, who does a lot of work with robotics, and he has been doing it since a long time. He also had had a surgery of an ear on his hand, through which he wanted to do a conference. That was also a performance that he did. Um, he does a lot of these kind of stuff. Then this transhumanism that I wrote, that's a picture which I kind of think represents transhumanism very aptly, because for them it's the logical conclusion of human being, further enhancement. It's a very positive view towards um, human machine kind of union. And then we have Matrix, the plugged in, that's more techno spiritual. It's like going into losing the meat, going into the cyberspace. And then we have the we have the ghost in a shell, which is a different case altogether. But yeah, let's. So yeah, the question out here that is central is, um, what kind of cyborg is the gamer? If it is, then out of all these versions, because cyborg is such a contested site, which kind of cyborg is he? Not necessarily post-human, of course, not necessarily the way Haraway, Bridotti, Hiles are imagining it. So yeah. The gamer in cyborg dreams. Gibson's idea of leaving the meat behind and escaping into the cyberspace has inspired many game scholars to imagine the gamer as a cyborg. In these accounts, while the intimate cybernetic connection between the organic and the machinic are taken into account, the games that built the context for this cybernetic union and determine the nature of the emergent cyborg are ignored. Example, the cyborg that emerges from a fighting game is different from the one that emerges from, say, a strategy game or an FPS, so on and so forth. While one is a twitching, explosive cyborg, the other might be characterized as a high endurance managerial cyborg. In short, a mere union of the organic and the machinic cannot be grounds for proclaiming the gamer as a cyborg. Perhaps taking the context into account is paramount in order to further this argument. This is self-evident. I don't need to explain this, I guess. So what I'll do is, uh, in order to explore this, that whether this, what kind of cyborg this human being is, this gamer is, I will go ahead and take I'll do two tasks, which is first understanding games as technologies, and then based on this, uh, I would reflect upon the relationship between technological and biological. So here is where the problem is laid out, and I'll just talk from here onwards, which is the difficult part. Anyway, so so games as technologies of what? So the first thing is games are disciplinary technologies. Second, games are technologies that have always been used traditionally in order to construct bodies. So going against the trend in game studies, I'm going to take a Orphic turn and believe that the discipline would not turn into stone. So let's go to, as is customary, let's go to the Greeks. In Book 7 of Plato's Law, uh, Socrates and Cleinias, the Athenian stranger, are discussing education, and he um, proposes that education has two branches: gymnastics, music. Music is for the soul, gymnastics is for the body. Gymnastics is further divided into two parts: dance and wrestling. Dance gives the body rhythm, while wrestling beautifies and strengthens individual limbs. They discuss that these things, gymnastics, horse riding, wrestling, can the role it plays in pedagogy in producing strong, predictable bodies, which the state requires. So during this during this whole discussion, what they do is they also start talking about the proportionality of hands and limbs, and they talk about like how certain activities the right side of the body is given more precedence over the left side, and therefore an imbalance is created. And then finally this balanced narrative, that they start with that, and then it goes to talking about balance between pleasure and pain, which laws seek to address. Now, interestingly, one needs to think at this point that why they're discussing games while discussing laws. So here it is very essential to know that because they're talking about the rules, the games are representative of these rules that needs to be followed, and that is why they are, and pedagogy of creating the pedagogy as a tool of creating subjects that the state needs, a kind of a technology, a biotechnology used in order to create desirable bodies, desirable subjects. Interestingly, I'll quote something. So so they say that who's the worst person, uh, and they start talking, and at some point they reach that who's the worst person, and they say, and the answer to that question is anyone who changes the rules of the game is the worst sort of is a person who does the worst sort of damage to the state, because changing the rules means not only changing the body but also manners of the youth, which is dangerous, which is a dangerous idea. Now, I begin the quote. People are apt to fancy, as I was saying before, that when the plays of children are altered, they are merely plays, not seeing that the most serious and detrimental consequences arise out of this change. And they readily comply with the child's wishes instead of deterring him, not considering that these children who make innovations in their games, when they grow up to be men, will be different from the last generation of children, and being different with the desire will desire a different sort of life, and under the influence of this desire will want other institutions and laws, and no one of them reflects that they will follow what I just called the greatest evil to the states. Changes in bodily fashions are no such serious evils, but frequent changes in praise and censure of manners are greatest of evils, and I require the utmost provision. So the paranoia underlying the whole idea is but evident. A slight change in the rules of the game might lead to production of a new creature with a new body, and this creature would be an abomination in the sense that it would be different than the parent, the previous generation. In doing so, the creature also threatens to replace the world of the parent. The threat of this possible annihilation makes the state regulate games and all other ventures that might lead to such a situation. In order to remedy this possibility, the Athenian stranger proposes a rather strict regime to regulate play, which includes appointment of female matrons who would monitor the public spaces like temples, where children might meet and create an improvised play. Furthermore, a residential school is also proposed, and so on and so forth. So, so the idea is to maintain the activities in such a way, to control the activities of games in such a way that it remains sane and produces a certain kind of body. So a similar kind of trend observes, Brian Sutton Smith observes a continuation of this treatment of games as technologies to construct body well into the contemporary schooling system. Even if you do not go to Sutton Smith, it's important to remember what happened during the colonial times, how educational system comes in. With the education, English education system coming in, there also comes the physical education part, which has been a movement in Europe, in England, especially in England, under masculine muscular Christianity, which is the physical education movement, and there also because that's also a reaction against the migration that is happening from rural to urban spaces in England. And after that, once it has taken ground in public schools, they introduce physical education for the first time, because that's where the poor people and the middle class and the new people come in, and that's where they come in. So they are trained, disciplined in a certain way. Once it's successful there, then it's transported to the colonies as well, where the um, impotent, physically weak human being is also trained and uh, rationalized in a certain way. So against this background, does one read video game as a break, or even as a challenge to this historical treatment of games? While it is tempting to point out the differences of video game play that video game play offers, it is important to note that video games retain their fidelity to rules, like their traditional counterpart. In fact, it can be argued that video games retain an even stronger fidelity to rules. Example, this can be observed in the way cheating operates in a video game and a traditional game. Cheating in a traditional game needs to be detected, proved, and penalized. In video games, it is impossible to cheat without declaring the intent to cheat first, as one can see in the deployment of cheat codes. This is a rather simplistic treating, but still makes the point. It is but safe to state that the cyborg body produced by video games and human body produced via games are both rule abiding. At this point, it is essential to revisit the conversation between Athenian and Socrates, and note that there is a political investment or a political will at work in making sure that the rules of the game are followed, not only during the course of gameplay, but historically and strictly. This for the sake of conservation of social order that might be threatened by creation of a different body, the other, which unfettered play or play outside the restraint of game is capable of producing. Yeah, which the other would be produced by unfettered play or play outside the restraint of games. In case one wonders, do video games produce a different body which can threaten the social order as techno games social order, or as techno games they fulfill this conservation project more efficiently than their predecessor. Uh, yeah. So so here I make another point at this juncture that just a minute. So video games, how are video games similar to the traditional games? Uh, because they fulfill the similar, retain the socio-political function of the structure that we recognize as games. That is to contain, restrain, and restrict play. Here, play is viewed as an organizational force, like Huizinga would imagine, or like the current. I mean, like all, even if you look at play psychologists and ethologists and other ones, I mean, like other people dealing with sports and games outside game studies, then you will realize that play is always looked at as an organization principle, as a force which helps organize the self in a variety of ways, and that is why there is so much investment in making games which can contain play, and that's why there is so much investment in controlling games, and so that because games are structures through which play regulates. So yeah. So human intent engineers structures to contain play so that play as a force can serve him. By playing within the boundaries of games, he can live longer, become muscular, healthier, can propagate certain value system based on competition, etc. So video games in their instrumental relationships to play, their fidelity to rules, the production of rule-abiding bodies, are continuation of the human ambition. Yeah. So here it's also like uh, also if you have heard of the philosopher Eugene Fink, who talks about oasis play as oasis of happiness, where he talks about talks about that play exists outside somewhere where we are in a life where we are constantly struggling with goals and ambitions and doing better in life and stuff like that. And play is somewhere we can escape. More or less, that's his argument, that we can go there and come back. And at that point, he makes a crucial difference. He says, "What is the difference between a player and a madman?" He says the player has the capacity to lose himself in play, to go to that oasis, as if it's someplace in between, goes there and comes back. The madman doesn't have the possibility of coming back. And this is what defines this also, like, because madman doesn't play a game. He is not going to a game. He also practices unfettered play. Therefore, he is the other in a certain way. So, yeah. Um, um, hmm. So another point that I make here is, in fact, the relationship to play that video games have and games have remain same, but video games as technologies are more efficient than their traditional counterparts. To briefly explain this trajectory, one has to look at another function that game structures technologies fulfill. Games as technologies are not only restrictions on play, they are also technologies that prolong play to make it visible. Not to say that play is not visible outside games, but play as a creative force, as viewed by play theorists, is a transcendental entity. It is free, without goals, and eternal. To observe play in this form generally requires a special pair of eyes that is possessed by the poet, Messiah, or the philosopher, or the king. Play in this form can be imagined as a fluctuation, governed by appearance and disappearance, always escaping the realm of visibility. Game structure as a technology behaves as a portal, where game is summoned, made visible for everyone for a fixed duration of time. Video games can prolong play and its visibility more than any other game structure. They achieve this end by delaying exhaustion to such an extent that it is invisible. Each kick, punch, or gunshot in a video game is translated into a press of a button. A slight flick of the joystick sends the avatar running across worlds. Video games provide movement with minimal energy expenditure. This delays the exhaustion that the biological might experience while engaging in similar activity outside the cybernetic setup of the video game play. In conclusion of this section, it can be proposed that the increase in the duration of play and a stronger enforcement of rules are two features that establish video game as more efficient systems than traditional games. Video games are still carriers of what has been earlier identified as human uh, ambition. Now, the second part. Now, keeping this in mind, games as technologies, as disciplinary technologies, and games have been used in producing certain bodies. And so far, what I have questioned is, are video games breaking the way games were conceived? Is there a new relationship that humans have found with play and games? It doesn't seem so. It is a continuation of the human project that games are still, there is an instrumental relationship with technologies, games as technologies as well. So this instrumental relationship is what determines the human doesn't just have the figure of a human doesn't just have an instrumental relationship with the technological, but it has an instrumental relationship with all forms of technology, maybe technologies of power, technologies of discipline. It is means to an end to achieve certain things, like sports would achieve a meritocracy or a competitive society, and so on and so forth. So keeping this in mind, let's look at the relationship between biological and technological. The relationship the biological has with the technological within the cybernetic setup would shed light on the nature of cyborg that appears through this setup. As mentioned earlier in the essay, cyborg remains a contested site. Yeah, I've said this. Mm, For instance, one of the many reasons why Donna Haraway finds the cyborg as significant for feminist politics is that it holds a possibility of a new relationship between the machinic and the organic. According to her, the Western tradition have always imagined and explained this relationship in terms of a border war. This imagination is central to the white male, racist, father-centric capitalist worldview that the figure of the man embodies. Bradothy, in a similar vein, observes that advanced capitalism marked by the way global economy has taken a techno-scientific structure and commodified life itself. She argues that advanced capitalism has unified all species, man, machine, and animal, for the purpose of commodification. This she calls the unity of post-human predicament, which is global. However, she also sees this as a moment where a new subjectivity can be proposed based on femininity, empathy, senses, love, etc., as opposed to masculinity, rationality, war, and mind, which define the human subject. Both Bridati and Haraway target a particular mode of relationship that human has with machine or technology. This relationship that human has with technology is constitutive of what it means to be human. To theorists such as Claudia Springer, the figure of a cyborg is a fascist fantasy. She argues that though it destroys the male body by adding technological enhancements to it, the cyborg figure preserves male superiority. Cyborg figure in popular media, even in destroying the human, preserves the patriarchal gender roles. They present a world where there are no humans, but things are gendered, and male superiority is sustained even after human has been sacrificed. According to Alison Murray, the cyborg figure is not a radical break from the notion of human and everything that Claudia Springer suggests precisely because it is a continuation of human. She understands the cyborg by locating its origins in the Enlightenment man machine relationship. Um, Catherine Hiles says something similar. So now, once once this is laid clear that how posthumanism is being proposed as like neoliberal policies and neoliberalization of the world has basically economized all aspects of human life, and technology plays a huge role in it, and that is what Pradati calls the post-human predicament, right? Now that we are all animals, technological artifacts, human beings, everybody is is facing the same predicament. Now the question is that whether we uh, give in to the cyborg figure that neoliberalism is proposing, because it is proposing some form of cyborgian futures and all. So, or do we reimagine those relationships? And that's why, like Haraway's later work on companion species and so on and so forth, are kind of related to this line of thinking. Now, when we realize that this is a contested site, and then we ask a question: what does the gamer represent at are is this does this have anything to do with post-human politics? And of course, then we have to look at how the cyborg figure has been imagined in within game scholarship, like uh, Fred Friedman imagines it, and he um, says that computer game to play a computer game is to internalize the logic of the program, and in doing so, the gamer experiences a unique perspective. The gamer not only thinks like a machine but also learns how to enjoy new kinds of stories. Then um, I can never pronounce this person's name. Marty Lahati, I guess, something. Yeah. Also imagines the game as a cyborg. For him, video games are sites that epitomize the new cyborgian relationship with entertainment technology. Argues that video games are sites where transgression between body and technology takes place, a transgression that is characteristic of contemporary culture. He proposes that video games commodify our cyborg desire. They invite us to learn repetitive movements and restructure the body and bodily experience. Dovey and Kennedy identify the figure of the cyborg as crucial to the study and understanding of game cultures. They propose that video game play should be seen as cybernetic performances, and gameplay can lead to creation of cyber athletes. However, the cyborg comes into existence only for the duration of the gameplay, when he is part of the cybernetic machine. These are but few instances illustrating the way gamer is imagined as a cyborg within game scholarship. This imagination, as one can observe, is dominated by tropes like thinking like a machine, desire to become cyborg, cyber athleticism, etc. These tropes either entertain an instrumentalist view of technology. Technology would expand the possibility of a human by acting as extension, through which humans or the merger is seen as a process of optimization of the body of the human, which is largely considered as expendable within this view. However, a destruction or abandonment of body counts for little, as the way subject is imagined and remains unchanged. It remains a white, male, rational war machine. In conclusion, what the essay has tried to do is put the imagination of the gamer as a cyborg to test by exploring the nature of the relationship between biological and technological, and also the activity that this hybrid is engaged in. In doing so, the essay tried to expose that the gamer in its relationship to games and its relationship to technology is largely a continuation of man. The aim behind this analysis was to drive the point that a mere merger of technological and biological doesn't necessarily mark the creation of a new subject, nor is indicative of a Siberian turn in culture. It might also mean an optimization of existing disciplinary structures and indicate a move from disciplinary society to a control society. Another point that needs to be taken into consideration while examining figures that have emerged in the wake of the cyber is the politics of the technological artifact. The technological artifact cannot be considered as a neutral site. They are products of a particular political will in history. Philosophers like Warbeck raise important questions regarding the intentionality of a technological thing. Technological artifacts execute an intention. The intention programs their being. Example, a technological artifact like video game is an offspring of an industrial, military, academic complex, an offspring of Cold War technology. This history of the video game is crucial to understand and address the issue of gender, violence, addiction, etc. in game studies. Perhaps before we become cyborg, it is important to ask what an individual technological artifact does to activities that are historical. What is the nature of the love we extend towards our machines? And what is the politics of a technological artifact? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhash, for a really expansive and well-rounded critique of the cyborg gamer figure. I'm sure we've all got lots to think about, and to be honest, I'm brimming with questions and things that I want to discuss more with you. But I think it would be a better idea to first just look at some of the comments and questions in the chat box. The first couple of questions we have are from Ishan Purkit. And Ishan, I was wondering if you are comfortable, feel free to unmute yourself and maybe read out your questions, and Prabhash can then respond to them.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yes, you are. Perfect.
Okay. So thank you for a very nice presentation. I just had a couple of questions. The first is that on the uh, idea of the gamer becoming a cyborg, you spoke about the different kind of cyborg rather than the question of is it a cyborg. So, sir, I
Mhm,
was wondering how you felt about the difference between the cyborg that is born of a casual gamer versus that of, say, someone who is an esports professional, because they're essentially two very different ways of interacting with games, and
mhm,
the very basis of their interaction with games is at a different stage. And
mhm,
the second question I had was about the question you posed about the intent to cheat. If you could elaborate on that a little bit, because I was just wondering about the idea of cheat codes that you mentioned versus something like aim hacks or wall hacks that are much more similar to cheating in traditional sports. Thank you.
mhm. Okay, great questions. So, um, see, what I am looking at is the bodies and games producing bodies, right? So now a kind of games would what kind of games would produce what kind of bodies. So I was not necessarily thinking about um, what kind of games, what kind of like you're talking about quality of engagement, right? When you talk about a professional gamer and a casual gamer, you're basically talking about the quality of engagement. You're not talking about the engagement with a particular game, because on the level of engagement itself with the game and what it produces, now the question comes in with the professional gamer and the casual gamer would be how efficient would this cyborg be? So how specialized this cyborg be? So questions of specialization and honing of or sharpening of skills, how sharp this professional can be. But at the same time, one needs to understand that while professional, because also the background to all this, background to the analysis is the um neoliberal setup, neoliberal regime, right? Which is based on optimization of all skills in all spheres of life, and that is why gamification is the current go-to term. But at the same time, we should not forget that gamification is a managerial technique designed to optimize all aspects of life. So amateur gamers still, like during the old times, like amateur gaming is still more respected than professional gaming. While professional gamers can be celebrated once in a while, it's going to be so difficult that very few people go there, and they would become entertainers, so to say, because they're so specialized that their skills do not translate into anything else but that one activity of playing. So the casual gamer, while playing, casual gamer takes the skills that one learns from the game and takes it back to the workplace, which is what everybody wants, which is what games were always designed for. Like you go ahead and that was the idea of being gentlemen, right? But that's why all Olympic sports are called amateur sports, because they're not played for money. So there is a disdain for professional sports, and it would be extended to professional esports player over a period of time. Mm, it's to me there's not much political difference that I see. So yeah, I hope that. And your cheat code question, yeah. The cheat code. Intent to cheat. So okay, let me clarify that I wasn't talking about online games. What I was thinking about is जो गेम मैंने खेले हैं, ठीक है? तो the idea was that 1990s 2000 थोड़ा when we used to play. So the idea was that what I the difference that I noticed was that if I cheat on chess, or I cheat in boxing, or I cheat in badminton, I have to be caught. I am one. I have the right to remain silent, which is a fundamental right, my right in a democracy. I do not have to prove my guilt. But in video games, I have to declare my criminality even before before there is no trial there. You see that the whole thing that I'm talking about is moving from disciplinary society to control societies. So video games represent something that is related to. So I wanted to drive that point. I'm sure you have counter examples, and I would love to hear them if you would entertain me.
Uh, no, sir. I
Yeah.
understood a little better now because
Mhm.
I was also thinking about the whole GTA cheat code thing idea that you were speaking about,
Mhm.
and I was just thinking in my head because online games are much more widespread, I guess, nowadays, and the whole cheating idea is a little different in online versus traditional games that require cheat codes. So thank you
Okay.
for your clarification, and thank you for the first answer as well. I did not think of it in that way. So thank you for that.
Yeah, but what are the how is it different? What I mean, like in online games, because I hardly am too shy to play online games.
So how it works is you need to install a software in the computer. It's an
Mhm,
external software that will
mhm.
give you an undue competitive advantage in game. That's the simplest way that it works. So
Hmm.
that would
So
be. It's not exactly like doping, but it's somewhat. You
very
could
nice.
compare it to that
That's that's a
unfair
good
competitive
analogy.
advantage.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So
And even
this
then,
again.
like admins have to check computers and things like that to make sure that there are no softwares that shouldn't be there.
Mhm.
So it's like that.
Yeah, you compare it to doping, which is very interesting. that is part of, like, you can see it, like, maybe now that you have talked about it, so you can see how doping, how the whole idea of institutionalization of sports was limited to codification and establishment of international bodies that can regulate and standardize rules across the globe, right? Now, slowly, when performance enhancing drugs come in, then what happens is it also stretches, like, after, there is a period during the Cold War period. Actually, this is the same time when video games are being produced, and through in the same military academic complex, biotechnologies are being discovered in which performance enhancing drugs are created, and also the desire to test them is also coming from the same space. So yeah, I mean, like, if that can be connected somewhere to your understanding, it would be great.
Excellent. I feel Prabhas and Ishan currently have really brought together the various elements which can both combine and conflict with each other when we talk about traditional gaming and video gaming, especially when we talk about online gaming. And Ishan, I was really glad that you mentioned aimbots and wall hacks, because when Prabhas was talking about cheat codes and cheating, I immediately thought of the same. And I think your questions really relate to each other too. And Prabhas has really managed to bring to us a very complex but a novel angle to the questions about the casual gamer and the professional gamer. I can go on speaking about this. It excites me too much, but we must go to the next comment first. So the next comments, questions are from Shovik Mukherjee. And Shovik, if you are comfortable, please feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I will read out the question.
Yeah, hi everybody, Zara. Hi Prabhash. Lovely to see you
Hello.
in person after
Hi.
so many days. And Ishan, some fantastic questions, and Prabhash, really nice paper. It's a very, very important paper. So first of all, I mean, I wanted to piggyback on Ishan's question since I have this opportunity, which is
Mhm,
about kind of cheating,
mhm,
which is not declared, where players can kind of use elements in games
mhm,
and kind of achieve goals that developers do not think are possible. For
mhm,
example, in Return to Castle Wolfenstein, there's a famous thing in multiplayer where you can
mhm.
commit suicide and jump across a wall, and that completes the game. So
Okay.
this is actually quoted by Espen Orsett. And there are
Mhm,
many others, but and then again, also kind of thinking of kind of cheating in a sense of kind of not playing the game as per the rules, kind of in a way being a spoil sport, but not really. For example, my favorite example of the priest who plays GTA and
mhm,
just takes photos of violent things happening and then posts stuff on the in-game kind of internet website. So all of
mhm,
this again, kind of, I'm just thinking that while cheat codes are a very important kind of thing, and they do address what you have just mentioned about declaring the intention to cheat. I mean, there are
mhm,
other more traditional ways of cheating in games as well,
mhm,
that just the very fact that they are games in some ways allows them
mhm,
to that's one thing. But I mean, my
mhm,
my major point was here is that this question about the cyborg is fascinating, and I'm thinking
mhm,
about the cyborg also in comparison to the monster. And
mhm,
you mentioned creature somewhere in
mhm,
your talk, and I remembered
mhm,
Frankenstein's creation. Of course, we
mhm,
always call Frankenstein's creation Frankenstein and the monster. Both are not kind of, but the
mhm,
whole monsterification or of the creature, or this is basically because it is a hybrid, and it is also an other. And
mhm,
Braidyoti actually talks about the cyborg as relating to the other in her essay
mhm,
Posthuman, All Too Human. So there,
mhm,
there I see a difference from Haraway, and perhaps she's closer to what you were saying, really,
mhm,
because she's falling back on Dillas as she usually does, and talking
mhm,
about the notion of the minor. That was
mhm,
one. And the second was about kind of my one of my things is about the very westernness of code. Code
mhm,
itself and software itself is is extremely Western and based in a certain kind of a continental philosophy, continental stroke analytic philosophy kind of paradigm. But what about the thinking of software and, like you used the phrase, technological artifacts, which actually are based on other notions or other philosophies, other underlying philosophies? And even then, looking at the games or notions of the ludic that are very different from the game studies, the received game studies, positions that you mentioned, from Sutton Smith down to Dovey and Kennedy and others and beyond, to perhaps other forms of other ways of thinking of games. For example, the Egyptian pharaoh played Senet because he thought it would govern how his day would go, right? It wasn't about kind of, so this is what I was also thinking, that both of my points are in support of your paper, but kind of trying to explore a couple of other avenues, really. That do we really need to actually always say that games, the notion of the ludic, is what is received from these very Western notions of play and games?
Yeah. So about that, I mean, I think, like I mentioned somewhere in my talk, I mean, like I'll respond to the immediate point that you just made. That so as far as other notions of playing and ludic are concerned, I think because I was coming from that tradition in which the codified ludic is part of the civilization mission. It has been spread across the world, and the Olympics and the things that we participate in,
Yes.
or the larger notions of the ludic, are are codified. And also at the same time, I would like to think of when I talk about codification, I do mean it in legal terms. That codification is a legal process,
Hmm.
and codification in terms of previous ludic structures is a democratic process in which the community participates in formation of the rules, and in there are multi parties which are involved in formation of those, in institutionalization of those structures. In video games, we do not see that. There is a pre-coded game that in which the community doesn't participate in creation of the rules of the game. So those are the like loose kind of differences that I'm seeing. And I mean, I get what you're saying, but the thing is that well, it was a
No, I'm
small
referring to
paper.
video games like Dhruv Jani's, Oleomingus Studio Oleomingus' games, or something like Antariksha Sanchar, which are not made, or for example, Nusantara Online in Indonesia. So those kinds of games, really, rather than.
Yeah. So that can be thought about. It's like such a small, they give such small word limits, so we can just, it's just so difficult to fit in things into that. And I mean, like the whole argument about the technological and biological, I was just not left with any words. So I was like, okay, ye kar deta hu, fatafat. So that's what happened. But yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I'll think of this
No, I'm just thinking
suggestions.
of future. I mean, future work that you're doing, because this is definitely going to lead to many other kind of questions. Because you're opening up this huge can of worms by calling out the cyborg in games, which is very much, Lisa Nakamura talks about the cyber types in games, and she talks about how for example, is identity tourism and this kind of things, and everything somehow becomes kind of equal, egalitarian, and there is no difference once you go into the game, right? Once you start playing an online game, everybody is equal. But your points about caste, class, all of these kind of location, all of these are extremely important when one's looking at the cyborg, and these
Yeah,
questions are going to
I mean, I never
bother
got
many
it.
game
So
studies critics.
yeah, I mean, like I
So
didn't. It never occurred to me. I mean, like I've been sitting in a dump and playing games. I never left for once. So I was always at the dump. So it's just weird for me to go when people start talking about like going into the game space and being an equal. Of course, you're not an equal. So
absolutely not.
I mean,
So
so it's
I mean,
like you're
Nakamura
playing
has
in a.
already said that for a long time, really. I mean, this is there from the 90s, really. Nakamura is writing in the 1990s, even before Espen Orset, I think, or maybe
Wow.
just after. So, but nobody, it's very easy to ignore such things, really.
Yeah.
I think
Did
Shobik has made
cyborg?
some excellent points. And I think the richness about your paper and your presentation is that they inspire these difficult conversations, right? We are made to think further, and that's what Shobik is doing. And I believe you are going to continue this.
Okay.
I think Zara is just frozen,
Zara
or
is, yeah, she was saying
yeah.
something.
I'm going to try to. Okay. Maybe she will be back, but in the meantime, I mean, I will take over from Zara, and just until Zara is kind of available to us again with the are there further questions? If there are any further questions, do write them in the chat box, or even so, just kind of just unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Sir, if I may.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
sure.
So you were speaking about the use of software manipulation sort of to get unintended consequences. So things like speed runs and the use of bugs in also in competitive esports, that could also be something in this context if we could talk about.
Yes, I
Because
think
speed
so.
runs generally involve some sort of a save glitch, save reload glitch most of the time, as well as recently there's been a lot of talk about bug exploitation in competitive esports as well. So
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to respond to that, Prabhash. He's asking about kind of bugs and speed runs also as kind of unintended, actions that are kind of that go against the intentions of the developers.
I would not be able to respond to it immediately. Like I won't count on my spontaneity, but I'll keep that in mind. I'll get back to you. Is that okay?
Of course, please,
absolutely, sir. It
please,
would be very
Yeah,
nice if you
yeah,
could.
yeah, I'll
yes,
keep
please
that in
feel
mind.
free to. Also, I would like to apologize for disappearing for a second. That's the internet in the place I am in. So I'm going to assume something really beautiful happened while I was gone, and I will catch up later. So
No worries.
please feel free to unmute yourself if you have any further questions.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes,
everything
you
is
are.
well.
Okay, so the thing is, when I was listening about this unintended by the developers, one prominent genre of games came to my mind. That is the immersive sim genre. So, pioneered by mainly System Shock and Bioshock, no, sorry, System Shock and DSX line of games. Uh, so there they generally what they do is they give you an objective and you have to do it however you like. The thing is they give you the tools and however you like, and you can there is not really a hard coded tutorial. And in fact the DSX is infamous for its first level being there being no hand holding, like they don't say anything, how can we do things, or how can we will solving these things. So in fact there has been many tries of they also have come up with very novel solutions which the developers just left it. The developers just left it, and they never knew that their games could be solved by that way. So that is why I was thinking that what if this instead of looking this as an you know, the developers didn't intend this, but why is the developer's intention, why does it matter so much in case of offline games? I'm specifically for single player games. Since we already are talking about if we are talking about author is dead, then why not why should developers intention matter? At the end of the day, we are taking over the game space, and we should be able to, and instead of looking at that, we should also think of this as one kind of a game mechanic, one kind of a mechanic itself. I was thinking.
Yeah. So, like, have you heard of choice architecture?
Yes.
Yeah. So, there is the claim can be made that it's freedom, but it is not, right? Intentionality, what I was talking about is basically Verbeek, a post-phenomenologist who talks about what things do. So in that philosophy, author is dead. Author is dead in the sense was a call for not doing author-centric. What did the author mean is not important. That's not where research should go. That was a call for that, basically. It wasn't a call for um, for saying that we take yeah, reader-centric idea of that. But the author always haunts the text, no? It's not that he's completely gone. So when Verbeek talks about intentionality of an artifact, he talks about small technologies like a speed breaker, and he would talk about small technologies like a chair, like anything. And by intentionality, he means he's taking a philosophical position there by saying that what is the thought or will that acted upon creation of these things? What was it that wanted to create it? And the thing is, that is an important question in in terms of understanding what things do. In order to even to give any it's giving a pop to the game, basically. It's to give, to consider artifacts or technology to be on your to see it as a medium which acts a will throughout its lifetime or whatever. And also it becomes important for us in order to talk about the politics of things. Things are not neutral. The point that I wanted to make was that things are not neutral. That's why I wasn't talking about particular games and what is the intentionality of a particular game. I was talking about video games as artifact and what is the intentionality behind it. So even when you think about what is like the intentionality behind the game that you mentioned, probably it's freedom. All intentionality is not bad. I'm not saying that it is bad or it is, but it should be cared for. That's what I feel. This receiving something on the face value of it is something I think you don't believe in either. I mean, like social media, what is the intentionality behind social media? That's a constant evolving intentionality that we have to constantly encounter and and also adjust our politics or in accordance with that. So it's a constant engagement with technology in order to, because intentionalities are also growing constantly. I hope that answers.
Yes, yes, thank you.
So once again, great questions and equally great answers, which are really going to make us think a lot. We're already running out of time, but if Prabhash allows me, I would like to ask a couple of questions because I love this area so much. It's part of my research too, so obviously that's why I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's okay with you, right? So
Yes, yes.
I was very interested in your theorizations of the cyborg gamer figure, and especially how you try to analyze what does it mean to imagine this cyborg gamer figure. In this vein, I would like to wonder if you've looked at the question of who imagines this gamer. The first question, the related question that I have for you is what do you think is the relationship between this gamer cyborg figure and code? These two are the questions for now, and I'm excited to hear what you say about them.
Yeah, this second one is would need some time, but I'll think on the go. The first one is basically who imagines this cyborg, right? So I mean, like in this paper, I am just thinking about basically the Western archive. No, within Western archive, there is a tendency of figurations like Homo ludens, like the cyborg, like the Homo politicus. These figures, like the human, these these figurations, as like Derrida points out, no, that these figurations have always been political in nature. These figurations do something in the discourse. They are protagonists of the discourse, or they are heroes somewhere. Like the human figure is also the hero of imperialism and things like that. So what is the cyborg figure emerges with a kind of an idea that yeah, technology and human beings are probably going to connect. But at the same time, as technology grows up and this connection becomes nearer, the Western canon doesn't stop thinking, or like doesn't change in its like the same traditions. The instrumentalist view about technology, the more inclusive view about technology. These are always at play. These are constantly at play, and they are also at play in order to occupy this new figuration of the cyborg. So that is why I talk about the cyborg as a contested site. So who imagines it? I think as far as posthumanism is concerned, it is a political imagination, and it is a contested site because it is a political contestation, that we're fighting over that, and our imaginations regarding that figure, or what do we want that figure to do. That is what it's just like fighting over any other figuration, like say India. What is my idea of India and what is somebody else's idea of India? That's where the political contest is, and we are fighting over India, an ideological battle. So yeah. And as far as coding and cyborg is concerned, uh, see,
I'm obviously
I'll just
referring to the codes of the games that we're talking about vis-a-vis the cyborg gamer figure.
yeah, coding in game. Gotta think about it. So it's a kind of a very complex question. I wouldn't want to answer it right now. I'll say something stupid.
Oh no, you're doing amazing. We're enjoying this talk so much,
No, I
and
mean, like
really,
this connection. It's like, see, I can take it and pitch it somewhere else. I mean, like, um, let's talk about the human and relationship between code and human. The relationship between code and human is central in terms of forming the universal legal subjectivity. That is a law which is universal, and all subjects abide by that law, and that law can be, as a human law, can be extended to everybody. So that subject, that is for human, as far as the liberal legal subject is concerned. But as far as the cyborg is concerned, the code in the cyborg, I don't know, gotta think about it, sorry. Yeah.
no, don't obviously don't apologize, because I'm thinking about these exciting bits about cyborgs and codes, and this is an area that I really
That's an interesting area, actually. I mean, like, I have to think more about it, so then I'll be able to.
think of in my research. And yes, I feel like our research points are working across dimensions and meeting at some point. So that is the interesting bit. I would just like to respond in terms of your first answer, and I really feel that you've answered my question perfectly. And I would just like to add on a bit that I feel that when you are presenting, you are also imagining the cyborg gamer figure, right? So you, as the imaginer of the cyborg figure, is something I would be very interested to hear about in the future. So yeah, because your situatedness really works with how the cyborg gets programmed in a techno discussion of this sorts. And it's very interesting how you then become a part of the network of the cyborg gamer figure. And I'm just wondering, where do you meet the cyborg figure, and do you become part of that assemblage then? So you can imagine what your talk has done to me. Very exciting thoughts coming in my mind right now. And the
That's
chat
very
box is on
interesting.
fire, so I'm sure you would love to read some of the comments that are going on in the chat box right now, all thanks to your
Oh,
brilliant talk, of course. So
oh.
if anybody has any last comments or questions to make, Prabhash and I would love to hear you if you unmute your mic, or you can just type it in the chat box.
Shavik has said something. Plugged into game studies in India. The cyborg itself has a code. The code is not prosthetic. You, as an imaginer of the cyborg, using a machine platform to communicate, which is also coded. Plugging in the cyborg game studies India assemblage. Okay.
Very interesting bits. And I would like to
Yeah.
suggest Anthropy's Dysphoria game. just to see how
Mhm.
much human bodies are really enmeshed in codes and interfaces, and how code really acts as both a part of the body that plays it, but also as a representation of that body. It's a wonderful game. You can just play it in your browser. I love the game. I've talked about it a number of times, and your talk just made me remember it once again. If there are no more
Yeah.
questions and comments, we can go forward to thanking Prabhash for his excellent, excellent talk tonight. We kept you for too long, I feel, but that is all because of so many avenues that have opened up thanks to your talk. And I feel for theorizations, this has become a talk that we will remember for a very long, long time. And I hope we can hear more and more about it in the future. And let's just take a last question that we have in the chat box. If you feel you're running out of time, you can just respond in the chat box itself.
Mm, let me check
So,
this again.
Oh,
I was wondering.
this is Tonguch. Sorry, I missed some sections. I don't know if this has been answered during the talk, but I was wondering how gamer-cyborg is different from other types of social media or digital media user cyborgs. Thank you.
Hmm. Um, the gamer cyborg, how is it different from social media cyborg? Hmm. Oh, see, I never thought. I never thought about it like that. Like I was just thinking about games, but then if we think like that, then what is see the ludic see what social media has done is also like here we need to talk about gamification. I'm sorry, I'm not drawing weird connections in order to make an argument, but here we need to think about gamification of what social media does to social relationships. Okay, of like how we got from the internet, from an economy of likes, from an economy of links to an economy of likes, and how that social relationships have been gamified. So I do not, if you need to understand, if we have to put it in any way, then I think both are you have to think of them in economic terms, like what Wendy Brown talks about when she talks about the Homo economicus. We need to think about that when she says that in the neoliberal reason, rationality, and neoliberalist regimes, all spheres of life are economized, judged in certain matrices, and done for certain kind of gains. So so in that sense, in only through that kind of an understanding of economization of all spheres of life, can I answer it? I can probably, that would give you something to think about at this moment, right? As far as those your question is concerned.
yes, thank you so much, Prabhash, for even attempting to answer this question. This is an expansive question, and I think we can go on talking about it for days. And what you have mentioned really makes one think once again about how to engage with the categories of the cyborg. And no doubt, this is something that will only continue in the future. And so this is it for today. I would just like to thank you on behalf of Game Studies India for coming here and sharing your research with us. It's a brilliant paper, and your presentation has been so fascinating. I really
Thank
feel
you.
that there are a number of threads in your presentation which will just excite more and more discussion. And this is a talk we're going to be talking about for a long time in the near future. And on the behalf of GSI, I would just like to invite you to come back to us again whenever you make a part two of this paper, because we are very, very interested to know what happens ahead in the future. Thank you so much, Prabhas.
Thank you so much for being kind enough to stay all this while and give me your time. I'm really glad you did. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With this, we end this meeting. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. As you know, our talks and meetings are about the participants, and you've been an amazing participant audience, and the chat box has really been a treasure trove today. So I thank you all for your participation and see you in the next GSI talk. Bye bye.